Good morning, everyone, and welcome into Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. My name is Joel Goldberg, episode number 84. We're into the 80s at this point, which was it's a great decade as far as I'm concerned. A lot of you watching don't remember that. Maybe weren't even born. Some of you remember it very well. We know it's a different world and a different place at this point. And one of the beauties of that is the ability to do a live show, just like it's TV, right here streaming out to YouTube, Facebook, out on the Twitter. We'll get it out on the LinkedIn later. That LinkedIn Live, they got this LinkedIn Live thing. You could submit to do it. And 4 months later, I haven't been accepted yet. So I keep thinking that maybe they don't like my broadcast credentials. But no, I think everybody in the world, like 1 million people at once, applied for that. So I thought, I'm not going to wait for that. We're just going to do the show. So 84 episodes in, told all kinds of stories. I love doing this. It'll continue when baseball resumes next week, Monday through Friday. I don't know if I have a death wish in doing 5 of these a week, or I just love storytelling. I think it's the latter, I think. But regardless, I couldn't do it without my friends at Enterprise Bank and Trust, hashtag no stopping you. They jumped in right away early and said, we want to go on this journey with you of storytelling, and have really supported me in talking about issues that are going on in this world and saying, go on out there, do that. We appreciate it. We want to be a part of it. So big thanks to Enterprise Bank and Trust. The gentleman that I have on my show today is one that I feel like I know a lot about his life. So in many ways, I feel like I know his life, and that's because of the memoirs here. And that cute kid is now a man that has experienced so much in life. Frank Clay Jr., Evidence Unseen, Finding the Faith to Overcome. To say that I have an author on today would just be a very small part of who he is, but he's an entrepreneur, a consultant, a speaker, an author, a veteran, a husband, a father, a grandfather. I think I've covered a lot of it, but probably not all of it, because he is a man that wears many hats. My somewhat newer friend, Frank Clay Jr., and also, I should say, the president of the National Speakers Association Kansas City chapter, which I am a member of.
Proud
Frank,
member.
how are you this morning?
I'm doing awesome. Joel, thanks a lot for having me. It's my pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the conversation. And Lincoln should really bring you on so that we can continue to hearing the great stories, because they are outstanding.
Yeah, I don't know if they're really listening or not right now, but you know what? I found a workaround, because I'll just take the thing and I'll post it on the LinkedIn, and people can watch it there. People can watch it here.
Right.
People can watch it anywhere. I want to just share with you, or with everyone else, how we met. I don't know why I feel the need to explain to people how I met someone. I don't know if anyone cares or not. Maybe it doesn't always matter. Sometimes I think it's an important part of the story. You and I would have connected one way or another, at least when I was, um, when it was suggested to me to join the National Speakers Association. A mutual friend of ours, Mary Redmond, had
Hmm.
said to me as I started on my speaking journey, and I was networking, and I met her and everyone else, and on and on and on. And she said, you need to join National Speakers Association. And being a newer speaker, and really only having lived in the TV world before I started speaking, I didn't know what national speakers. So my response, before I even asked how much it cost, was, well, I mean, is it worth it? And she said, I wouldn't tell you to join if it wasn't. And I understood what she meant now, because there's so much, not just friendship and camaraderie, but education opportunities, networking opportunities. I
Right.
learn every single time. So the long version, because it's always the long version with me, of this story, was that Frank and I were 2 of 8 speakers at a showcase, well over a year ago now, almost
Right.
a year and a half ago, on the
Yeah.
UMKC campus. And you have 8 speakers kind of crammed into a couple different green rooms, and everybody's sort of getting ready, and each speaker's going out there over the course of 3 hours. And the last 2 speakers on what was a long night
Both
were
of us.
were both of us. And so, it was like, last 2 standing. Was so you and I had this bond that we created that night. So it's a long way of me saying that I'm glad that night happened, and that we got a chance to
Yeah.
get to know each other. And now here you are as the president of the chapter. And that might sound like a nice little title and all that, but man, oh man, I know you're really busy with this stuff, aren't you?
Yes. As a result of COVID-19, things that I thought we would be doing in person we've had to adjust very quickly to the conditions, and we're looking at virtual programming as well as hybrid programming, which is both live and virtual. And all these things are new. And we're supposed to be the professionals out there. So we're getting up to speed very quickly as an organization. We're wanting speakers and those of us who are out there needing to know more about how to speak virtually to come join us and let us help you be more proficient in what you're trying to do. So as the president, the new president, I've been hit with all the responsibility to make it happen, and I'm more than happy to take on the challenge.
It's a lot because there's so many different levels to it, and nationally, the National Speakers Association it's a huge. I can't even speak this morning. I don't know. I mean, who would think I'm really a speaker? I feel like I keep adding an extra syllable into National Speakers. Anyway, sometimes we have those days in television. I've been doing this a long time, actually, but when I think about it, this isn't just getting a bunch of speakers together. I mean, there's so much involved on multiple ends, whether it's continued education for us, whether it's recruiting new members. There are a lot of people in this world that speak in different ways too. I mean, for me, it's a second business. For a lot of speakers, it's part of their actual business. How about for you, Frank? I mean, you've been an entrepreneur for decades now. You've got the Clay crew, the Clay Group. You are a consultant. Tell me about, outside of National Speakers, about your different endeavors in terms of a businessman.
Well, I had the Clay Group, which ended in 2017, and as I was winding down, what happened was that I decided to actually go to the Olympics in 2018. And at that time, I just found out I was going to have my first grandson. Mm-hmm. Now, you got to remember that my wife has 3 sisters. She has 4 aunts, no uncles. They have 1 nephew. And then I end up having 5 granddaughters. And so finding out that I'm having my first grandson was monumental to me. And so as I was approaching going to the Olympics, which is another story, I decided on the trip over to start writing about my life because I was concerned at the time. They thought, North Korea was going to bomb us or something. And I said, well, what if that happened?
That was because Frank, that wasn't just something in your head. I mean, 2018, this was a legitimate thing with the U.S. and Korea.
Yeah, it's a possible reality. And when that happened, I literally wrote the book on the way over there. 13, 14 hours worth of just constant writing. Because I wanted my grandson to know. It's interesting. I wanted him to know about the challenges that I went through and that those challenges didn't define who I became. And so the title, Evidence Unseen, is all about sharing those things that people don't know about and how I had the faith to overcome. So that's kind of what happened there. Fast forward, I did write the memoir, and I was actually promoting my book up until the beginning of this year. I had all these things planned, all these events scheduled, and then I celebrated my 65th birthday in Cabo, Mexico. When I got off the plane, the world changed completely. Everything canceled.
I guess this was March.
Yeah. So I've been busy trying to redefine what contribution I can make to help people to get through these challenging times, because I've been through them. I've been through 9/11. I've been through some national crisis when I was with Johnson & Johnson, where I was part of the national sales planning team that made the decision to take all the Tylenol off the shelves, doing the right thing. So I think I have something to contribute to the conversation right now. So I'm busy about doing that, and being the president of the National Speakers Association really has given me an opportunity to do that i.e., that's why I'm here with you, because of our relationship there.
Right, one that's just really still in the early stages and growing.
Yeah.
And I love that to continue to get to know people, build that trust. Um, the Clay Group was 2006 to 2017, but you mentioned Johnson and Johnson. We have a very long, storied career in business, and like so many of my favorite guests, there's no way to really label you because you've done so many things and you have your hands in so much. So, I sort of said it a little bit in the intro. You served the country. I know that the Clay Group was very involved in veterans. You were a college athlete. There's when you talk about. By the way, that flight over there to the Olympics was what 15 something
14
hours. 14 hours. So you can write a lot. I don't know. I don't know if you could write all 400 pages of this.
I did it. I did
all
it.
in four. I mean, so that tells me something about you, because I think I would spend 14 hours on a plane writing one chapter. And I don't know if that is a struggle with focus or whether that is just uncertainty. But it sounds to me, just in you describing that you are a guy that, you think about something and boom, you get going, very determined. And I mean, you must have been just unloading a lifetime's worth. And by the way, you're a phenomenal storyteller. So there's so many, when you write this book, and this is what I was thinking as I was reading, I feel like I'm being taken back into places. Like I'm envisioning you. We'll talk about this in a minute. I'm envisioning a young Frank Clay Jr. in Philadelphia at that point, being chased by dogs and running through ice cold water and all. Like, how much did that stuff all flood back with your grandson in mind as you're taking this long trip around the world?
Well, it's probably more revealing now that, we have all this concern about Black Lives Matter and all the issues that people are referring to. It kind of brings you back to the fact that things happen and you just have to deal with them right at the time. But the point of the whole book was you can't let them define who you're going to be. You still have to dream. You still have to plan. You still have to network. You have to find a way to overcome those situations if you're going to see yourself be successful in life. And that's one of the things I want to encourage to young people today, no matter what we're going through, the COVID or the civil unrest that we have going on, is that this is not the end. We'll get through this. Things will get better. But my stories are probably real to a lot of people because they're usually not told, and therefore they're unseen. I'm talking about what people will go through if you're in corporate America, what people will go through if you're in business. Those are the things that I'm trying to uncover, because if you do get your education, get off the streets, and you get involved into business, working with organizations, you still have these challenges that need to be confronted. And so there's a way to do that. And hopefully by looking at my life, people can learn from that. And I was basically writing that so that my grandson would know. I think there's some value of just being aware of what could happen so that you can avoid the traps that are out there. And there are a number of them that are there. And so you have to just deal with it.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. What are some of those traps? And I know that could be a discussion that goes on for days, but give me a few of those traps that you're talking about for a young person. My friend, she's my most loyal follower of this show, and one of my new friends during this pandemic, Kiana Sinks. I mean, she's 25. She's making an impact in the community. And she went off to a small school as an athlete like you did, and suddenly ends up being involved, I think, with the president or the chancellor of helping bring on change at a school that was showing Remember the Titans for Black History Month, and so she started making an impact, and she talks about still have challenges in the climb. I mean, this is a young woman, we actually texted this morning, that that is battling a lot of these
Right.
types of challenges every single day. So when you hear young people, whether it be someone, really young like your grandson, or whether it be a teenager, someone in their 20s, or shoot, even somebody that's older like me, what do you say?
Well, I think the main thing was not the main thing. There's a lot of things, but I'm just going to answer your question and just go through some of the traps.
Yeah.
One of them is about education, particularly if you're growing up in the type of community that I was in. You have to battle your peers. Some of them who are good students and understand what education can do for them, they're going to stay on course and go down the road. Others will downplay education. And one of the traps that we have with our peers is that if we're around people who downplay education, then when we finally get to that point where education is important and having a degree, we're shut out of a lot of opportunities. And so we have to see that that's a trap that is either created by ourselves or created by other people that need to be overcome. And that was more evident when I was a star athlete in high school. And as I approached my senior year, it was clear I couldn't pass the SAT test. I wasn't speaking well. My comprehension wasn't what it should be. And fortunately for me, I had teachers like Mr. Hill who mentored me and told me the right thing to do. And I had an English teacher who was new, who worked with me after school. She knew what I needed to do, and I was willing to do it. And because of that, I was able to graduate and get a scholarship, and that was the platform for all my success. Another example would be is that we know that I always say, don't let your fun, your fantasy, your folly, or your foolishness be your failure. So in that regard, when we get to the point of being teenagers and we involve ourselves with drinking and doing drugs innocently, but if you go too far, you set yourself up for failure. And too many people fall within that trap. And then if somebody in your circle falls into that trap, they want to draw you into the same thing. And before you know it, you've created a culture that is pro-drinking, pro-doing drugs, rather than maybe reserving that as a casual thing to do and not just a normal thing. So those are two traps that I say that are there for young people. But when you get into adult life, you got to be careful about traps that are set, particularly for African American men. I call them honey traps, where you're responsible, but you're getting involved with the wrong women, and that could come up with various in various ways. But if you are a married man and involving yourself in that type of situation, you're doing business and you end up doing the wrong things, that could mess up your family and then ultimately mess up your career. So I really kind of deal with those type of things out front. So those are just three of them just for conversation. But there's more in the book that we can talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot more in the book. I think about one right now, and I'll jump around here, but I think about one that you talked about at one point that involved an excessive amount of whiskey sours, but not really, and a little scene at the bar, and a statement ultimately that you had to make. And I want to set it up, and I'll let you tell the story, of course, but the challenge is one of the things that I've learned, in the last couple of months is truly what white privilege meant. I never knew it, and I've said this over and over again, so I apologize for those that have heard it, but it wasn't enough just to treat people well, which I always did. That's the way I was raised. It was needed to recognize that some have privileges over others, and that doesn't mean I have more money or I have a better situation. It means that, for instance, as I progressed in my career, everyone understands what it's like to be the new guy, the new woman. The challenges of proving yourself, the challenges of fitting in. But the white privilege is not having to then prove more because my skin wasn't different, right?
Right.
And so that's one of the many challenges I've come to learn about African Americans, that it's not just a hill to climb being new to a situation or having to prove yourself. You have to do more. And so it's not just, hey, here's the new hotshot salesperson, or here's the new, here's the new team leader. You have to prove yourself and justify yourself more just because of the color of your skin. So I want to ask you one about your perspective on that, because I believe, and in reading the book and getting to know you a little bit, you've dealt with that your whole life, even back in the military. And then two, I want you to tell that story, because I think it's a pretty good example of the way you were judged.
Well, I think you're referring to the one when I was in the officers club, so to speak.
No, well, no, there's that one too. No, I believe that this one that I saw in here, and I have to pull out the page, involved a scheme of you were invited to a bar at a function or something like that, and no one showed but you. And I think they were trying to set you up.
Okay, I got you.
Right, and I think you turned the tables. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I was with a Fortune 100 company, and I was one of the first managers to be a part of the management team. And this is one of the things that, whether it was deliberate or not, it happened. And I was invited to the complex and then asked to be at a certain place, which had a bar area. And I was asked to be there at a certain time, and I did. And when I got there, the music was playing, and there were these ladies with balloons, and looks like they were celebrating something. So I sit down, and then all of a sudden, they're coming over to me like I had hit the lottery or something. And so I'm sitting there, and part of me saying, hey, this is really nice, I had my first drink and everything. And then I began to feel like, okay, this is like going a little bit too far. I don't know if I've done anything other than show up to this meeting, and I'm here on business. So I went to the bar, because there really wasn't a waitress or anything like that at the time. And the bartender kind of alluded to me, thanks to him, that I'm being set up. Okay. And at that point, I said, okay, I gave him a $20 bill. Firmly remember that. And I always carried a lot of cash on me just so I could do things I needed to do. But I gave him $20, and I said, every time I order something, just give it to me in the same glass you would give a cocktail in, but just make it water. And so I went back to the seat with my glass, and I began to kind of test this whole situation out and just say, okay, let's have a good time. And I kind of pretend like I was really overwhelmed by what was going on. Well, lo and behold, some of the senior executives come into the area, and they kind of sit behind me, and they're not joining me. I mean, maybe this is part of the program, that I would think that they would join me if this was a big celebration of some sort, but they didn't. They stayed in the rear, and I really had the feeling that I was being watched and being judged. Like I created this. I didn't create this. I'm just doing what I was told. So knowing that, I decided to test the situation out, and I gave each of the ladies $20, and I told them, do the same thing you're doing to me, to them. And so that's what they did. They were very glad to get the $20. They got up with their balloons and everything and went to them. As soon as they did that, I got up and I walked out. Nobody asked me to stop and join them. And nothing was said the whole time of the whole meeting. So that gave me a real good feeling, having been a military officer, one of the things that we learn is situational awareness, where we actually study in warfare. We study behaviors of those people who we are observing to determine what their motives are. And so I was really, not intentionally, it's just by instinct. I was like, this didn't happen, that didn't happen. Nobody said anything. We all saw it. And the whole time I was with the company, nobody ever said anything about the situation. So at that point, I knew I had to watch out for myself in all areas because something was up. Couldn't put my hand on it. Can't tell you who did it. Can't say anything. But those are the kind of things that happen that if you don't deal with those things correctly, I could have really been drunk, which I've known to do in the past. Maybe it was a test for me to see how I would handle the situation. I don't know. You don't know these things. Mm-hmm. But I think that if people read my book, you can be aware of these things, particularly young people that are talented, they have a lot of things going on for. You don't want to let that situation define your opportunity to do great things with any company.
You know what? What I love about the book, I mentioned the storytelling, is that there's so many stories like that. I want to hit on a couple of other of them too, because they're really interesting stories. But it's not a woe is me. It's more of a lessons learned. I wouldn't say a red flag, but it's again reaching out with your grandson in mind. But think about anyone that's reading about seeing these situations and understanding them. I don't know that you fell into those traps, but you experienced them and you came out through the other side. I mean, finding the faith to overcome. So we don't know if that one with that bar incident was just testing the new guy or if it was race related. But I know that you have dealt with that as most blacks have in the professional world or as kids too. Your whole life, how much, going back to say the 60s, the 70s, I mean, 60s you're in high school, right? I mean, you're going off to Towson State to play basketball. By the way, I need to see if I can find this here because I got to pull up a couple of those pictures at some point because, Frank looked like he could play a little bit. I think the pictures I see on your website are of you and your wife and you in the military. I'll show those in a little bit, but okay. I know in the book there's some great pictures of a young athlete there in action. It's fun to see that. 1972. I won't tell you what I was doing, but I was alive at that point, so we have that much going for us. Yeah, I was born in 72, but you've experienced this at so many levels, and I just sort of wonder with what's going on in this world today, how much has changed, how much hasn't changed.
Well, I think the listeners should know you're from Philadelphia too.
Yeah, way back when.
Okay. And so you can agree with me somewhat that back then and there, I would refer to Italians as Italians. I would refer Jewish people to Jewish people. I would refer Hispanics as Hispanics. Until I left Philadelphia, I didn't see color. I would not call you a white person. I would call you Italian. I would know that you're Italian, Jewish, but because of the way our neighborhoods were, right. You didn't travel, and you didn't have a car to travel into each other's neighborhood. I mean, either you walked, or you took a trolley, or took a bus, and so that kind of limited you to what you were exposed to, but if you knew what you were getting into, and there were good people and there were bad people. So my neighbor was Jewish. My father would take us to 8th Street, about 8th Street, and get our food from all the Italian folks. And we had great relationships with everybody. So when I came to Maryland in junior high at the time when George Wallace was running for president, that was the first time that I really ever got discriminated against. And since you mentioned that, it's like here we are with these nationalist views again, and it does bring back some memories, which leaves a lot of question marks because I never understood why people were treating me so bad because of the color of my skin. To this day, I just don't understand it. Didn't understand it then. But I knew it was happening to me. I knew those things were uh, taking place. So I know that there are forces out there. There are good forces. There are good people. There are bad people.
That could be somebody important. I don't know.
Um,
Hold on, I'll help Frank out here for a second. I'll mute him while he figures that one out. This is live TV, folks, in 2020. That's the way it works. Okay, you're good.
I can't see you though.
I see you. You're all good. So keep on.
Really?
Here, I'm gonna let Frank handle that for just a second. I'll pick this up. Actually, what I want to do, real quick, while Frank is handling that. This is, by the way, we deal with this type of stuff in live television all the time. You roll with the punches. Is I wanted to show a little bit of Frank's website, and there's his wife Joy, and there you see the young military officer Frank Clay Jr. And there's the book that I referenced too, and really one that I would highly recommend to everybody. You can find it at frankclayjr.com, and just some phenomenal stories here in Frank's life, and certainly plenty about his stories. And I got to ask Frank, by the way, about this. I was looking at this a little while ago. Traveled to all 50 states, played golf in all but 5 of them. So this is a man that has certainly done and experienced quite a bit in his life. Hey, Frank, you like that tap dancing there for you?
Oh man, that was great. I got my phone here sitting next to my phone, and when you're dealing with Apple, everything goes off.
I know it's all linked together. Let's continue the story. And you were talking about George Walsh. So I think that was probably the 1968 presidential run.
Correct.
And something we're talking about 52 years ago.
Right. And so all of this of what I'm seeing involved, from Martin Luther King to what we're seeing with George Floyd, it's like a 65-year movie of things happening that has kind of gone 360. Except it's a little bit different right now. I think that the big difference right now is that people who could do some things about the way things are doing those things right now. Mm-hmm. That the discussions that should have happened in the past, people are free to have those discussions. I mean, just look at this conversation we're having right now. Yep. I mean, you are just bold to have this conversation based upon your status. People could have this and that to say, but I know you feel very strongly about it, and since both of us from Philadelphia, I mean, we're the city of brotherly love, and I think we gravitate to what is possible with people's relations. Both of us know about athletes and seeing teams work together and do great things. I mean, you called the last World Series locally, and we thank you for that outstanding job. And so, there are African American players on those teams that did great things. So we can't condemn a whole race because of a few bad people on either side. And I think we're coming to that. So I think I wanted to just do this. If I showed you this. Oh,
yeah. Yep.
Okay. You see that. You're looking at the back of this coin. Mm-hmm. Okay. But you don't know what's on the other side. Right? And I think that there's another side to this coin, okay? But you don't know what's on the other side. And I think when we have these conversations dealing with race, we tend to just look at one side of the coin. But the reality is, it is a coin. It is a reality that has 2 sides to it, or more sides to it. And in order for us to really engage in these conversations, we have to just look at each side of the coin, but realize it's one coin. It has a value of one, whatever that coin is. It has value. So we can't discard one side and not respect the other side. And it could be a box, it could be anything. I'm just saying that we're only capable of seeing one side of the coin when we're having these discussions. But if we were to have a discussion about what's going on with race, and I like to distinguish when I'm talking about this, I like to distinguish between Black and African American. That's just me personally. It's that I'm an African American. I know I'm Black, but I think the Black-white analogy always pulls us back to that mindset of the past, when I think we should try to look at where African Americans and that people could see the American component of it, of what we have done since coming over here to slavery. But let me just go down a list of things and give you a feel for topics. When we talk about race, or anybody brings up the conversation of race, you're talking about slavery, 40 acres and a mule, reparations, Jim Crow, civil rights, Confederate flag, Confederate statues, the election, COVID-19, knee on the neck, George Floyd, peaceful protests, National Guard, riots, burnings, defund the police, eliminate the police, photo in front of the church, 45, 43 in NASCAR, Kaepernick, NFL, SOBs, BLM, Black on Black killings, Black gangs killing children, unemployment, poor children, drugs, abortion, 20%, 2% of African Americans are likely to have convictions. 47% of people have been wrongly accused. I could go on and on. Where do you focus your conversation on? It's just so much. And it wears people down. When you hear people from the African American community saying they're tired of having to address all this all at once. And what I've seen is that it gets down to two things: conversations and conditions. We got to have conversations to make things better. Okay. And so we got to be willing to sit down and talk, but we can't talk about everything on the list at once. We got to narrow it down and have good report. I know that you know that you know that I know that we're talking about this. We're talking about stopping bad police from killing innocent men, African American men who are secured and on the ground. We should be able to agree on that needs to stop, or whatever else. And the other thing is, we need to know that conditions are the things that are going to make things better. A worse condition only makes things worse. So when we see African Americans in a bad condition, it's only going to get worse unless somebody does something about the conditions that they're dealing with or they find themselves in. So I think if we can bring those two things together, what happened in the past, we weren't able to have those conversations. What happened in the past, the conditions were drastically different. Now it's a little bit different. Fast forward, we can have these conversations. We can, if we can give checks to everybody, for COVID-19, then we can fix the situation that is causing a racial divide. We can improve the education because that's the condition. I go back to what I was saying before, and we have to have better education for those people who are drastically being impacted by the way we do our politics and deal with our humanity. We have to improve the education. We have to improve the healthcare. Those conditions, if they're not improved, they will get worse. And we will continue to see the list get longer and longer. So that's my reflection on where we were to where we are today. We got to have these conversations, and we have to do what we can to change the conditions that people live in, work in, worship in, etc.
When we all talk about systemic racism, and I'll continue to bring this up, the African American pastor that I had on recently, Pastor AD3, made the comment that there can be racism without racists because the system. And so, at the deepest level, when you start talking about more blacks having COVID, it's not because the color of your skin makes you more susceptible to this virus. It is because of the healthcare, because of the jobs that are forcing them, or they're in a position where they have to go to work, and the privileges that I might be able to have versus others. And so I have the ability to protect myself more from this virus if I so choose. Others don't have that. So I think to me COVID is the current example of how, or the inequities in our society of how others have a better shot that some do over others. And so that's the deepest level. At a personal level, I just feel like, again, I'll get back to it. I think generation by generation, and I want you to tell the story about the dogs and chasing them, because that was, whether you knew it at the time, there was potential racism there, and a very dangerous situation because of the color of your skin. And I'm not saying that wouldn't happen today. There are certain spots it would. But I do believe that as generation goes by and generation goes by, more young kids are being taught to treat others equally. So, for instance, me growing up in the 80s, but 70s, 80s, I knew right from wrong. My parents taught me to treat everyone equally. Now, that doesn't mean everybody does that today, but I think as each generation goes by, you start chipping away at some of that stuff that you dealt with, just on a face-to-face level, of right and wrong. So I just never thought, well, I should treat this person differently or the same. Now maybe I did, not knowing it, but you know what I mean? Like, I never,
Right.
I would never think of picking on someone, taunting someone, or doing anything because of the color of their skin. And so as each generation goes by, you hope that parents or kids, like our kids right now, they have a different perspective than what I did, and I have a different perspective than my parents did, and on and on. But I know stuff still goes on. So tell me about that story. I don't remember how old you were, but you were new to the area and found yourself, I think it was leaving school one day in the snow, and suddenly having to potentially run for your life.
Yeah, I had just moved from Philadelphia to Maryland in Prince George's County, and my first day, and I was maybe one of about 5 African American kids at the school. So um, I remember very vividly because it was right at the time um, George Wallace was running for president, and people were putting these signs in front of me, and they were telling me to go back home. So I get it for young immigrant children who have to face this type of thing. It's very damaging. It's very disrespectful. It's degrading. It's discrimination. But I can't say that all the students were doing this. It's just a few people that were still doing that. So my first day, this was like a lot of stuff going on. Where people were, wouldn't let me sit down in a chair. And I'm from Philadelphia, so at this point I'm exposed to gangs and everything. So I'm kind of a tough person, and I'm like not really dealing with it because I'm like I'm not moving until you make a move. I mean I'm used to that, so it's you're not. I'm not the person that you would just kind of scare away because we deal with that every day when you're in the streets of Philadelphia, people trying to intimidate you. So that wasn't going to work. I didn't think that they knew about my character at that time. But the fast forward, as we got into the winter, there had been a snow, and for some reason, I had a requirement to stay late to do some work at school. And when I left, I came out and I could feel it was just quiet. I can still feel it today. It was cold and it was quiet. And normally you would hear some movement. You would hear something.
This was and Frank, this was, if I remember correctly, this was junior high, I think, right?
Right. Yeah. Yes. It was like 8th grade, 7th, 8th grade, and so I only knew one way to go home. It was like a little woodsy area that you had to go through, to cut through, to get to the road that took me to my house. And so as I approached that, all of a sudden I just hear these dogs start barking. I mean, but I knew from Philadelphia what a mean dog looked like. I knew from Philadelphia because I had one of my own pets killed by a Doberman Pinscher who saved me from being killed as a little boy. And I was putting out the garbage and my dog ran out in front of me and the Doberman Pinscher went and killed, we called it Snowball. So I knew that sound, and I instinctively started to run toward my right at the time in the woods. And as I ran, the sounds got closer. And then I said, well, so as I started to run more, they started to, kind of gain on me. So I started running, and what happened was I ran down. It looked like I was going down because it was like in the evening and I could see the shadows. It was like I was going into a valley. And then I got to a point where I was running and my feet were in mud or water, but, I'm like, where am I? I'm like running. So I could run so far, and then I would run in the water and I keep running to the right. And then I just kept going. But the bottom line is, after I finally ran so far down into where I was at, I could hear the dogs kind of waver with their howling. And then at that point, I wasn't going to go back that way home, so I had to find another way. So I started going up a hill. And when I got to the top of the hill, I had to make a decision to go right or left. Now, you talk about thinking this thing through. Did you see the movie with, what's the name? There's a movie that came out. I'm drawing a blank.
We'll think of it.
Okay. So I made the right decision. I'm all muddied up. I'm all from my head to my toe. And now I'm thinking that, hey, my mother's going to kill me because I know I'm late. I mean, it was almost dark. My mother was on the step, but she probably knew something was wrong because everybody was looking for me. And it was almost dark by the time I found my way home. So, this is like leaving school. It should have been like almost a 3 or 4 hour ordeal for me. Years later, when I was actually doing the research for my book, I had to ask myself, did that really happen to me? I mean, because I never understood why my legs were so wet. And it wasn't that much snow, but there was all these leaves, and I never understood it. But I understood that maybe that tough running that I had to go through kind of saved my life because the dogs couldn't get to it. But somehow I got through it. Well, I did a Google. You can do the Google satellite and actually see the environment, and I found the school, and then I looked at where I might have ran. And then I looked down there, and lo and behold, I said, there is like a mini pond, big pond right there. And it slopes off to the right. And I ran into that pond, that body of water, and went down that way. And I could see the road where I had to make the decision. And And I said, man, God saved me through that whole situation. I mean, had it been for that pond, who knows what would have happened. But I was actually running into the pond, getting real wet, and then detouring toward the edges and actually running along the edges. And I could see where the bottom part of the pond is, would actually put me on a trajectory where I would end up at the road where I had to make the decision to go left or right. God knows. If I had made it right, I would have been, I don't know where I would have ended up. But I made it. So that's the story. So at that point, I was, real careful, very careful, and very, I don't think I'm fearful because I think I knew fear a different way in Philadelphia. So I don't think, I was just puzzled, I hadn't done anything, to deserve this. And quite frankly, there's another story in the book that I talked to about my neighbor who's Caucasian, and I helped save his his sister from being raped. And we became close friends. So I had a close friend down the street that was Caucasian or white. So I knew that everybody wasn't that way. Because, and he would come to my defense for anything. So it was quite an interesting time for me. I just think it was, I feel for the people who are being abused because of people's politics. I don't take that very well. I mean, you can vote for who you want, but to place that on a child is not right when we don't even know what we're doing. We don't know what's happening.
Well, who knows? And that's what I was thinking about with that story. I mean, there were some kids that were out to get you that day with those dogs.
I don't know if they were kids. I don't know who they were.
Adults could have been right. Could have been
I don't
anybody.
Know who they were. To this day, I don't know who they were.
Yeah, and this would have been, I'm guessing, about would have been early 60s, maybe. No, a little bit later than that.
It was 68. It was right around.
68. Okay.
It was right around that time. Right.
And I love the nickname of your friend too. Sting, I believe, is what his name was. The kid down the street, right? The neighbor.
Yeah.
Sting. Didn't know what you called him?
Well, when you're writing a book, you can't use the actual name. So.
Oh, so you made that one up? Okay, wasn't really sure. You know how sometimes nicknames can go with kids and friends and all of that too. But
let me tell you, when I wrote the book, one of the things I did is I hired an editor to rename people, and because I couldn't do it. I didn't want somebody coming to me and say, you renamed my name. I wanted to have an excuse to say, hey, look, I didn't do it. The editor did it.
Yeah, right.
It was very difficult for me to really, shape the book to be printed. It's with Simon Schuster. They have all these requirements, and you know how it is in business. So
it's a beautiful book. It's a beautiful memoir, and I'm going to share one more thing before we wrap it up. And we didn't get time to get to it, but if you buy the book, which you could do at frankclayjr.com, and by the way, this is Frank's fourth book, so you see the others right here. You can get all of them on his website.
Thank
you. There's a story in there about Frank getting pulled over while he was in the Army and getting off the exit at Fort Bragg and wasn't speeding, ends up in, and his whole unit, he had to bail out his whole unit, which led to all kinds of other crazy stuff. So like I said at the start of this, you're an amazing storyteller, and all of these stories, which goes right into the title, Evidence Unseen, Finding the Faith to Overcome, so many lessons in here. And so I encourage everybody, and I'll pop it up here again, to just check out the website. I know that, Frank, you live every day to make an impact in people's lives. You're doing it through National Speakers Association. You're doing it as a business coach. And I've got to imagine, final thought here, that is the energy that keeps you going every single day. 65 years old, with everything you're doing in National Speakers Association and as a consultant and a coach and all of that type of stuff. I don't know how you have time to play golf, but I guess you do.
I give it one day. No, I'm working on a campaign. I don't know how it's going to work. I'm working on my second book on leadership, or my next book, I should say.
Yeah.
But if you hold your hands up, Joel,
All right.
you can see that we have something in common. And so I am working on a campaign to have a button produced that says basically, let's forgive and let live. Okay, I don't know how that transfers, but to me, it's like let's give up on this whole thing of disrespecting each other, and let's forgive and let's live. And then I have 4 things that I'm going to emphasize. Let's live lawfully and let's live justly, dealing with the laws and dealing with what we can do to provide justice to one another, regardless of the situation. And then I'm advocating let's live peacefully so we can stop the violence, stop the shooting, and let's live lovingly. And so I'm hoping to put that together. Maybe when I get it together, we can visit again and
let's do it again.
So that's what I'm working on right now from the heart.
The beautiful thing about this show is I could have you tomorrow, next week, next month. I get to call those shots. So I will put my hands up with you, my friend, and I will remind everybody the message that you just said.
I appreciate it. You do a great job, Joel. I appreciate your commitment to taking action. And incidentally, I'm working with businesses to have this conversation in somewhat of a different way. But that is the times that we're living in, and you're kind of spearheading that. So I'm definitely promoting you to other people, because I think you're like, you're bypassing a lot of the red tape and you're getting it done. So I appreciate that.
Well, it's taking advantage of a platform that I don't know that I fully understood I had, or the responsibility that came with it. So I don't want the attention beyond people watching this show and sharing that message. And I'm just, I'm humbled and proud to be a small part of it. But I want to share those words again.
Let me say this before you close.
Okay.
What you're doing is you're not only rounding the bases, but you're touching the bases. And I have a short story. When I first played baseball, I remember running the bases, had a good hit. And when I got to third, the coach said, "You got to go back to second." And I said, I didn't have time. I ran back. And then after it was over, he's telling me, "You got to touch the bases." Nobody ever told me that. But my point is that as we make change, we got to touch the bases for it to count.
Wow.
And you're doing that.
Wow. I love it. It's a deeper meaning for sure. And I'm pausing here to think about that because I hadn't thought about it that way. And so you just opened my eyes to something.
Yeah.
I jotted this down because I want to repeat it. Live lawfully, justly, peacefully, and lovingly. I don't know who wouldn't want that. I know there are a lot of people that see things differently. I know that there are some bad people out there. But I don't know who wouldn't want to live a life lawfully, justly, peacefully, and lovingly, and want that for our friends, our neighbors, even our enemies for that matter, if we have them. So,
exactly.
Well said. So much to think about here. I'm so glad that we had the opportunity, Frank, to do this. My friend Jennifer Dehan just threw it out there. Lawfully, justly, peacefully, lovingly. Can't really think of anything better to say than that. So grateful for Frank. I'm grateful for your leadership, your storytelling, your willingness to share and make others better within National Speakers Association, within our community, and beyond. By the way, real quick, what was on the other side of that coin?
It's a picture of the Capitol.
Okay, I was just curious. By the way, that the symbolism of what you said was fully understood, but then I started thinking, well, what is on the other side? I see.
But see, that's the key. If we can ask what is going on the other side, that brings understanding.
Yeah.
But remember, it's the same coin.
Same coin. We're all in this together is ultimately what the message is. Remind everybody again to check out the book, Evidence Unseen: Finding The Faith to Overcome. It's a phenomenal memoir, frankclayjr.com. Thank you, my friend, for spending the last hour. This was awesome.
My pleasure. Be safe.
All right, that is Frank Clay Jr., president of the Kansas City chapter of the National Speakers Association, business coach, author, husband, and much more. My name is Joel Goldberg. Thanks for watching Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. Hashtag no stopping you. I'll see you back here for another episode tomorrow, and have a great Thursday, everyone.